Well, welcome everyone. So the story tonight is a Jataka tale. I don't know if you're familiar with the Jataka tales. The, the Jataka tales appear to be traditional Indian folk tales that were co-opted by the Buddhist to represent the Buddha's previous lives. In other words, in order to become a Buddha, it takes many, many lifetimes, and you have to clean up all your karma. You have to be really a wonderful person. You have to practice all the Brahma Viharas, especially compassion. And so these are assumed to be the Buddha's previous lives. There's a collection called The Hungry Tigress by Rafe Martin. I don't know if it's still in print, but that's where I first heard this Jataka tale, first read it. And some of the Jataka tales made their way to Greece. You've probably heard of Aesop's fables. Some of Aesop's fables can be traced back to Jataka tales. As an example, one of Aesop's fables is about the fox that's trying to get some grapes that are too high, and he's jumping up and trying to get them down, and he can't get them, and finally he walks away saying, "They're probably sour anyhow." This is where we get our phrase sour grapes, okay? But it's got a Buddhist thing. He was suffering dukkha at not getting the grapes, but he was able to release his craving by saying they're probably sour anyhow, and that alleviated his dukkha. So I don't know for certain this comes from any Indian folktale or anything, but it always struck me that when I finally learned about that some of the Jataka tales became Aesop's fables, that this might have been one of them. But tonight's talk is the banyan deer. A banyan deer is a deer that has so many antlers that it looks like it's a banyan tree turned upside down. The banyan deer was born into a deer herd in the forest and quickly showed prowess at everything deers can be skilled at. And when the banyan deer finally grew to adulthood, he became the leader of the herd. And for many years, he led them in safety in the great woods. But things change, and a new king of the humans came to power near the great woods. And this new king loved hunting. He felt hunting was the best thing he could do with his time because it kept him fit for war. He loved nothing more than getting up at the crack of dawn, getting some of the townspeople to serve as bush beaters, getting the members of his court, and they'd all go riding across forest and fields and everywhere, hill and dale, hunting, killing animals right and left. The king was very proud of himself and what he was accomplishing. Nobody else particularly liked it. The members of the court were used to a more genteel life, and getting up at the crack of dawn and spending the whole day on horseback, chasing after the king while he was pursuing his hunting, shooting animals right and left. They didn't really enjoy that. The townspeople didn't like it. Nothing like getting ready to open your shop and some of the king's soldiers showing up and saying, "You're a bush beater today, don't open your shop, come with us." And then having to go running across trying to scare up animals for the king to kill. But you know who hated this the most? The farmers. You might have a really nice crop growing, not quite ready for harvest, but it's going to be a great harvest. And suddenly all these people come trampling across your field on horses, on foot, destroy your crops. Everybody was grumbling. Nobody knew quite what to do. After all, he was the king. It was the farmers who came up with the idea. And they told the townspeople, and the townspeople told one of the members of the court who they thought might be sympathetic. And indeed, this minister was quite sympathetic to the problem. He did not like getting up at the crack of dawn and spending the day on horseback. And he went to the king and he said, "Great king, all this hunting indeed does keep us fit for war. But, we don't have any enemies at this point. So it's not terribly necessary that we do this every day. And when we go hunting, we ride across the farmers' fields and trample their crops. Great king, this might lead to a famine. And I don't think you want a famine in your land. Things are going fairly smoothly now, but with a famine, all sorts of troubles crop up." The courtier didn't mention, of course, that he hated getting up at the crack of dawn and the complaints of the townspeople, but he figured the famine angle would work. And the king was like, but, and the minister said, "We have a plan. We think you will like this plan. The farmers are going to donate some land near the great woods that's not very good for growing anything. And we're going to build a giant stockade, huge, so huge that you can barely shoot an arrow across it. A big stockade. And then after it's finished, we'll go into the woods and we'll find some animals, like herds of deer, and drive them into the stockade. And then we'll build a viewing platform, and you can hunt from the viewing platform, and you won't trample anybody's field, and there won't be a famine, and you can keep your eye finely tuned as you're shooting all the way across the stockade at the animals on the far side." Well, the king didn't particularly like the idea, but he had to admit causing a famine was actually not going to work terribly well. So reluctantly he agreed. And so the townspeople and the farmers got together, cleared the land, and built a giant stockade. And then they went into the forest, deep into the forest, and they found 2 herds of deer and drove them into the stockade and slammed the door shut. One of the herd was headed by the banyan deer. They reported back to the king that the stockade was built and he should come take a look. So he rode out with some of the members of his court. And there was a nice viewing platform. He mounted up the steps and looked in. Well, this is a lot better than he thought. It was huge. He could just barely shoot an arrow to the far side where it was going to arrive with enough lethality to be functional. And it was full of deer. This would feed his court for a long time. This was great. He quickly spotted the leaders of the 2 herds. A king knows kings, right? And he said, "Oh, these are the leaders of the herds. They are under my protection. No one is to harm them." And then he strung his bow, grabbed some arrows, and started shooting. It was 5 minutes of sheer terror. The deer were trying to avoid the arrows. They were hitting each other with their horns and their feet. Some were hit by the arrows and injured, some were killed, others were injured by their fellows trying to flee the arrows. It was 5 minutes of terror. It was horrible. And then the king unstrung his bow and said, "Oh, collect our supper." And so the members of the court went and collected the dead deer and brought them back for the evening meal at the palace. The banyan deer went to the leader of the other herd and he said, "Brother, I've tried to find a way out of here, but I don't know one, and I don't have any ideas how to solve this. But we have to keep up the spirits of our herds and keep thinking about what to do." And every few days, the king and members of the court would show up and repeat the 5 minutes of terror. This went on for... And then the banyan deer went to the leader of the other herd again, and he says, Brother, I have no idea how to get us out of here, but I think I can reduce some of the suffering. What I think we should do is draw lots. One day from your herd and one day from my herd. And whichever deer gets the short straw must go and present themselves to the king. This won't stop the killing, but it will stop us injuring each other as we flee from the arrows. And it will only be, hopefully, one deer each day. The leader of the other herd agreed that this was better than what had been happening, but yes, still problematic. So the two leaders drew lots to see which herd would go first. And the losing herd, everyone drew lots. And the next day when the king arrived, there was one deer standing down below, trembling, and all the other deer at the far end of the stockade, looking at the king. The king was like, "These are magnificent beasts indeed. They apparently have chosen one deer to come by lot. Okay, we will honor what they want to do. Shoot the deer that waits below. Don't harm the others." Then the king left. One of his courtiers dispatched the deer below. Each day, first from one herd and the next day from the other herd, one deer would draw the lots and have to go stand and be the dinner for the king. This went on for almost a week. It was the other herd's turn, and the lot was drawn by a pregnant doe. And she rushed to the leader of the other herd and said, "It's not fair that two should die. Please, let me give birth to my fawn and wean it, and then I will take my place." But the leader of the other herd said, "You know the rules. You've drawn the lot. There's nothing I can do. You'll have to go present yourself to the king." In desperation, the doe fled to the banyan deer and again told her plight. It's not fair that two should die. The banyan deer said, "You're right. It's not fair that two should die. Our agreement was that only one would die each day. You are free to go." The pregnant doe rushed back to her herd. But the banyan deer now had a problem. He couldn't very well ask anybody from his herd to go. It wasn't their turn. When the members of the court showed up, the king had not been out in all week. To shoot the deer that waits below, the banyan deer was waiting for him. This presented a problem. The king had said, "Do not harm the leaders of the herds," and the king had said, "Shoot the one that waits below." Nothing to do but send for the king. And so they dispatched a messenger back to the palace. The messenger arrived with the message, "Your Majesty, you need to come to the stockade right away to see an astonishing sight." The king mounted up and rode like the wind. He'd been having nightmares about deer. And maybe what was going on there would help with his nightmares. He dismounted and bounded up the steps 2 at a time, and there was the banyan deer waiting below. The king said, "Banyan deer, what are you doing? I told everyone, you're protected, you're under my protection. Why are you waiting here instead of some other deer?" The banyan deer looked up at the king and said, "The pregnant doe drew the lot today, and it's not fair that 2 should die. So, as my prerogative of leader of the herd, I've taken her place." The king was astonished. It had never occurred to him that as a leader, he might need to sacrifice himself for one of his subjects. That was very strange, but also very interesting. I mean, this was an example of compassion like he'd never even heard of. Wow. Banyan deer, I deeply appreciate this lesson that you have taught me. And in thanks for you teaching me this lesson, you are free to go. The banyan deer said, "Won't do any good. You'll just kill some other deer." "No, I have my duty, you have yours. Shoot." The king was used to, sitting in judgment on criminals, and he'd say, "Kill this man," or "Throw this man in the dungeon." Or occasionally he would say, "Be out of the kingdom by 5 p.m. or you will die." And then here he says, "We could kill you, but you're free to go." And the person says, "Nah, kill me." That just did not register. But that's what the banyan deer just said, because it would fall on other deer. He was not going to leave so that somebody else could die. Banyan deer, you are a magnificent beast indeed. As a reward for your magnificence and the lessons you're teaching me, you and your entire herd are free to go. Now are you happy? The banyan deer looked up at the king, said, "Won't do any good. The burden will just fall twice as hard on the other herd. No, I have my duty, you have yours. Shoot." The king was completely flabbergasted. He just released half of the animals in there and it gotten turned down. But again, he had to admit the banyan deer did have a point, because they were just going to kill a deer from the other herd every day. Maybe drive another herd in there as well. What to do? The banyan deer was right. The banyan deer was brave, standing there saying, "I have my duty, you have yours, shoot." Okay, banyan deer. You and your herd may leave, and the other herd may leave. How would that be? We'll throw open the gates of the stockade and all of you can go. Now are you happy? The banyan deer looked up and said, you'll just go back to killing the other four-footed creatures. The killing will go on, even if it's not us. No, I have my duty, you have your duty. Shoot. The king again had to admit the banyan deer was correct, because that's what he was thinking. We'll just go back to hunting like we used to. We could leave the stockade, tear it down, but we'll just try and not go across the fields, and the banyan deer again was totally correct. The killing would go on. Okay, banyan deer, we won't kill any four-legged creatures. None. No wild animals in this kingdom. Now are you happy? The banyan deer looked up and said, you'll just change to killing the birds. I know you. You'll have your arrows and spears and nets, and you'll be trapping birds like crazy. This is not a good thing. No, I have my duty, you have yours. Shoot. The king had been thinking exactly that. Well, okay, so we won't kill the four-footed creatures, but hey, there's lots of birds here. There's pheasants and lots of tasty game still. Okay, banyan deer, look, we won't kill any birds. We won't kill any wild creatures, any four-footed creatures. You can all just go and live in peace. Now are you happy? The banyan deer looked up and said, who will speak for the silent ones, the fish in the lakes and rivers and streams? Your men are out there with nets and hooks catching these right now. The death will just increase. The killing will go on. No, I have my duty, you have your duty. Shoot. The king turned to all the members of the court who were standing there rather astonished at what had transpired, and he said, this is my decree from this day forth. In my kingdom, no one is to harm any wild creature, no animals, no birds, nor fish. Print up this proclamation and print it where everyone can see it. And then he turned back to the banyan deer and said, now are you happy? The banyan deer looked up at him and said, yes, and leaped high into the air. They threw open the gates of the stockade. All the deer went back into the forest, deeper and deeper than they'd ever been before. Eventually, the king had the stockade torn down, where the banyan deer had leaped high into the air. Out of the joy that he had saved everyone, the king had a stone cairn erected, and a circular plaque placed on the cairn. And it showed a deer with many antlers leaping high into the air. And around it he wrote the words, never cease to care. So I like this story because it illustrates the four Brahmaviharas. To be willing to sacrifice his life for the pregnant doe. Another spiritual teacher said, no greater love has anyone than they would give up their life for another. This is what metta is about. It's this unconditional love. I know it gets translated as loving kindness, but Ayakema, my teacher, translated as unconditional love. Loving someone just because they're someone. No conditions attached. The Greeks had multiple words for love. You've probably heard this: philos, brotherly love; eros, romantic love. You also had agape. This is what metta is. This love with no strings attached. And of course, in the commentaries, they talk about the near enemy and the far enemy of each of the Brahma Viharas. The far enemy of love is hate. This is fairly obvious. The near enemy is attachment. We live in a culture that promotes love as attachment, love as a transaction. I'll do this and you'll do this for me and so forth. But this isn't what metta is about. It's loving just because there's someone there to love. The second of the Brahma Viharas, karuna, is usually translated as compassion. This is often interpreted as there's love. This should be your attitude all the time. And when you go out into the world and you encounter suffering, you do what you can to alleviate that suffering. So compassion would be metta in action in the face of suffering. The far enemy of compassion would be cruelty, causing harm for whatever reasons. The near enemy is often said to be pity. It can have some attachment in it. Oh, let me help you so I won't have this poor person in my life. Right? It's about me not wanting to have that there. Or let me help you so that when I help you, I'll feel really good about myself. Again, attachment, self-interest in there. But real compassion is, oh, I see you're suffering. Is there anything I can do to alleviate your suffering? And if you can, you do it. And if you can't, well, then you can't. Furthermore, compassion has to be done with no attachment to the results. That's hard. We want to help this person out, and we do the very best we can, and we expect it to work. We expect them to appreciate it, but if it's true compassion, it's done just because it's known that this needs to be done. That's it. And there's no attachment to the results. If it works, great. If it doesn't work, you did your best. And then, so metta, karuna, mudita. When metta goes out into the world and encounters rejoicing, it rejoices with it. Mudita is translated multiple ways. The first time I heard it was sympathetic joy, which meant exactly the same to me as the word mudita. I had no idea what either of them meant. It was just like, what? I knew sympathy and joy, but what does that mean? I've heard empathetic joy. Well, that's a little bit better. I like appreciative joy. Appreciating that someone, including yourself, is rejoicing, is having good fortune. And yes, you can practice mudita for yourself. It's in the suttas that way. It's in the Visuddhimagga that way. It's only in one of the sub-commentaries, a commentary to the commentaries, is the prohibition from practicing mudita for yourself in there. So if you have good fortune and you can appreciate it, that's mudita. Now, if you make the mistake of having good fortune and think, this proves I'm a wonderful person or anything like that, in other words, if your ego gets involved, that's not mudita. That's the near enemy. The far enemy of mudita is envy. We have a good English word for that. Somebody wins the lottery, and you're like, why didn't I win? I bought a ticket. I need the money. Right? This is envy. Mudita would be, oh, I hope they can use the money wisely So it brings them great happiness, and all the people that know them, it brings them great happiness as well. That would be mudita. The near enemy is rejoicing, but with some ego involvement. The Super Bowl is coming up this weekend. And so maybe you're going to watch it. Maybe you're not at all interested. But if you're going to watch it and your team wins and you're rejoicing, are you rejoicing because a bunch of grown men playing a kid's game won the last game of the season and you identify with them? That's not mudita. That's ego, right? Suppose your kid comes home from school and they have excellent grades and you're happy. When the neighbor's kid comes home from school and has even better grades, are you even happier? If so, that would be real mudita. Yeah, this is a difficult one. I've heard it said it's the most difficult one to practice. I very vividly remember the time that mudita came naturally to me without me trying to force it or anything. I was driving to work. It was like 7 minutes drive to work. And I stopped at the stoplight. And this couple crosses the street in front of me. They're very much in love, or at least in lust. It was very obvious they were totally into each other. And for the first time in my life, I didn't go, oh, why not me? I went, oh, isn't this sweet? And then I realized that's what mudita is. To see something happening that's really positive for someone and appreciating it. Appreciative joy. Another example, remember back when they had the Winter Olympics in Canada? Remember the hockey? Yeah. So the finals were between the United States and Canada. And the U.S. had already beaten Canada once. And whoever won this game was going to get the gold medal and the other team would get the silver. Now, the percentage of people in the United States, actually the raw numbers of people in the United States that care about hockey, is pretty small compared to Canada. And there was going to be a lot more rejoicing, I knew, if the Canadians won the gold medal. And so I could actually cheer for the Canadians, even though I'm an American, because there was going to be more joy. And I could feast my mudita on their joy in a much more joyous celebration than if the Americans won. And they did win in a very dramatic fashion. Yeah, so this is one that needs a lot of work. I mean, we don't even have a word for it in English, which shows how badly we're missing this one, but it's really quite important. So love at the top. If it goes out and meets suffering, compassion. If it meets joy, rejoicing, appreciative joy. And it's all balanced on equanimity, upekkha. Upekkha literally means standing near, but it has a connotation of standing near and not getting freaked out or blown away or caught up in or anything like that. You're able to stand near with what's going by. It's usually talked about as even-mindedness. So something happens and you don't panic and you also don't become over-exuberant. Your team wins the Super Bowl and you don't go out and turn over police cars and set garbage cans on fire. That's not equanimity. The first time the 49ers won the Super Bowl, I wasn't practicing then, and I went for the celebration downtown San Francisco and high-fiving everybody, and it was totally crazy and nuts. When they won in '89, I'd just come back from, a lot of Buddhist studies. I'd been practicing well in Asia, and I went to the celebration when they won, and it was I set for myself the task. Can I celebrate and remain equanimous through the whole celebration? It was an interesting thing to do, to really appreciate everybody's joy and everything else. Maybe it wasn't mudita, it was just crazy joy. But I could stay equanimous through it. Just, this was what was happening. So, yeah, the far enemy of equanimity is getting upset, becoming overexuberant, acting out, whatever. The near enemy, apathy. You don't look upset, probably you aren't, but that's because you don't care. Upekkha fully cares and still doesn't get upset. As a side note, where I went to college, there was a lot of apathy. So somebody had the idea of having a meeting on apathy. Only nobody showed up. True story. But yeah, we want to try and have an equanimous mind. A mind that, doesn't get freaked out with what's going on. They can just really be present fully with whatever's happening. Now I'm going to do a course for Berry Center for Buddhist Studies on the Brahmaviharas in, I think it's November. If you're on the BCBS mailing list, you'll see it when it shows up. If you're not, they have a lot of good courses. A lot of them are on Zoom. This will be on Zoom. And so I thought, well, I should actually do some research on the Brahmaviharas before I do that course. And so I actually figured out a way to find what various topics are and have references to these topics. And I have like 90 topics now on my website with references to them. Metta shows up in 214 sutta links. And when I say sutta links, sometimes there's a link that links to multiple suttas. They're all very short, one-word chains, something like that. So I don't know how many suttas. 214. Karuna is in 53 suttas. Mudita is in 42 suttas. And Upekkha, equanimity, 220 suttas. Because it shows up as part of the fourth jhana, as well as the Brahmavihara, and as well as the last of the 7 factors of awakening. Clearly, the Buddha thought that Upekkha was extremely important. So these are the Brahmaviharas. Ayakema said that these are the 4 emotions we want to cultivate. Everything else, there are some others that aren't talked about much, but if you cultivate these 4, you'll be doing really well. One other one that I will introduce is anukampa. And that would be a word that could be translated as care. And so when the banyan deer leaped high into the air, mudita, celebrating that he had saved them all, and the king put up the stone cairn with the circular plaque, and around it, never cease to care. I suspect the word in Pali is anukampa, but I didn't look up the Pali for the Jataka tale. So I think that's all I have. If anybody's interested in these 90 indexes that I have generated, I just stuck the link in the chat. And I'm still working on it. There will probably be more. But you'll have the link. And if there's something you want to look up and find what suttas they're in, once you click one of the links, it'll take you to an index that has links to all the suttas that I found with that. And this is done with an automatic thing. So there's a disclaimer. Before you start using anything, read the disclaimer at the very top. Okay? But that's what I've got to share with you tonight. Questions and comments? Drake.
Um, hi, Leigh. Well, thank you. This is the first time I've got to talk to you since Cloud Mountain in 1999.
It's been a while, yes.
Yeah. Uh, well, could you please explain how do you cultivate that evenness and not be get freaked out by the ups and downs in life and not have your ego get all bruised?
Right. So, probably the first thing is the topic that I found the most references to, which is mindfulness. So, anytime you find yourself in a situation where freak out or over exuberance is possible, you need to be mindful. This is a situation where I could lose my equanimity. All right. And you may have to say that out loud to yourself, even if that's appropriate. So, the way to cultivate it is to recognize the opportunities, right? If it's a huge tragedy, that's probably not going to be your starting point, right? But something that, yeah, you could get overly excited about this thing. And can you recognize, oh, yeah, this is an opportunity to get overly excited. What's it like to not be overly excited? What else can I be aware of other than my internal excitement? And so using your mindfulness just to explore what's going on. And the same thing if it's a scary situation and there's a tendency to want to panic. You know, panic is the worst thing you can possibly do, right? So what can you do other than panic here? How can you keep your mind stable enough? This is not easy. They say the mudita is the hardest one to cultivate, but upekkha in stressful situations is probably even harder. But get your mindfulness in there and recognize the situation. That's the first thing you've got to do. And then, okay, remember that what you're striving towards is equanimity, even mindfulness. And you'll just have to figure out, given the situation, what you can do to move in that direction. There's probably not any general rule, except don't panic.
Oh, well, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I like that to
Good.
investigate what else I can give my attention to and learn from.
Right. So there's a question, are the Jataka tales part of the Pali Canon? Well, it depends. So there are actually 4 versions of the Pali Canon. I think it's 2 in Sri Lanka, 1 in Burma, and 1 in Thailand. And in at least one of those, the Jataka tales are included in the Pali Canon. And in at least one of those, the Jataka tales are not included in the Pali Canon. And I don't remember which collections and how many it's included in and how many it's not included in and so forth. But I would say that it's a late addition to the Pali Canon when it's included in the Pali Canon. And I think of them as interesting stories. If you find Rafe Martin's The Hungry Tigress, it's worth reading. I mean, there's some interesting stories in there. And so that'll give you a sense of them. And I think a lot of them have been translated. So, yeah, they're Indian folk tales, and most of them have to do with compassion towards others. Linda.
So when I'm listening to this story, Brahma Viharas did not cross my mind. I thought it was about becoming a vegetarian. Was that not part of it?
Well, it it may be part of it, but I'm going to leave it to you to interpret it that way. Okay? So there is a sutta, it's number 55 in the Middle Length Discourses, where Jivaka, who was the royal physician in the court there at Rajagaha and was the Buddha's personal physician, came to the Buddha and said, the people in town say that your monks are going to eat with people and causing all sorts of animals to be killed. And the Buddha said, no, no, that's not what we do. The monks can eat what's put in their begging bowl as long as they don't know or suspect that an animal was killed expressly for them, which would mean that if you go to someone's house and they serve chicken curry, you can eat it. But if you go to someone's house and before the curry is served, you hear squawking in the backyard, and then there's chicken curry served, you can't eat it, right? And there is someone, Devadatta, who came to the Buddha and suggested that the Buddha have 5 more precepts to make the order more ascetic. And one of them was that they be vegetarians. And the Buddha said, not practical. The populace isn't vegetarian. And if we were vegetarians, they'd have to cook a different meal for us. So you can eat what's in your begging bowl as long as you don't know or suspect that some animal was killed expressly for you. And that's the sutta thing, the sutta teaching on vegetarianism. Now, yes, if you're a vegetarian, fewer animals get killed. This is true, but you're going to have to make up your mind for yourself. I refuse to get involved in that. When I saw my teacher Ayakema 3 weeks before she died, and her parting advice for me was, don't get involved in Dharma politics. And that has been wonderful advice, and it's kept me out of a lot of trouble. So I'm going to, leave it up to you to figure it out. Just like if somebody says, can I have a glass of wine, or does that break the 5th precept? I'm going to leave it up to people to figure it out for themselves, knowing what they know, what they've learned, what their heart says.
All right. Well, thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Leigh.
Hi.
I've had a great day with you. I listened to the recording. I had to go to a symposium last week, so I missed the class. So it's fun to see you twice in one day. Can you do a little more parsing about between Anukampa and Karuna? Because I've always wondered about that. What I've learned is, which is probably very incomplete, is that Anukampa means trembling with. So it's what we would think of as compassion in the sense that you're actually feeling what the other person is feeling. And Karuna is more about like taking compassionate action. I don't even know if that's correct, but that doesn't satisfy me anyway, even if it is correct. So if you can just parse that out a little more, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, so this is unsettled, shall we say. So I didn't know the word Anukampa until I was on retreat with Gil Fronsdal, and he started talking about it, and he translated it as care. And he said, if compassion means finding someone who's suffering and helping them, that's a limited set of people. But care can be for everyone, whether they're suffering or not. You care about them. The people that you really care about, you still care about them whether they're suffering or not. So it's got a broader range than compassion does, the way we usually think about it. So once I had, worked through looking at Karuna and Anukampa, Anukampa, by the way, shows up in 179 suttas. quite a bit more than the 40, the 53 for Karuna. But in looking at what's there, it's quite clear that Karuna is the opposite of cruelty. Okay, so is that kindness? That seems more like the opposite than helping those who are suffering or compassion. And yeah, okay, so if that's what mudita is kindness, and you can be kind to everyone, but you're not probably going to care deeply about everyone. So anukampa, I mean, yeah, now it's not really clear. The good news is that Gil Fronstel is working on a book, I think, on this. And hopefully we'll have a really good book out at some point in the future. But he seems to be the anukampa guy. And so if you can attend something where he's teaching on compassion or anukampa or any of these, that would be certainly a very good person to talk to. I've just started exploring these. And part of me wants to translate anukampa as care and karuna as kindness. Of course, that inflicts with loving kindness, but that's okay with me because I'm going to translate metta as unconditional love, and the word kindness doesn't show up there. But that's about the best I can do for you.
But if anukampa appears that many times in the suttas, how did it get aced out of the Brahma Viharas?
I suspect, well, it's not in the Brahma Viharas in the suttas. In the suttas,
No, I know, but I mean why it seems odd that it's kind of dangling out there, but it's mentioned more often even than karuna.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, the Brahma Viharas are taught. All four of them show up in 38 suttas. So most of the places that mudita shows up or karuna shows up are in the 38 suttas where all four are showing up. So why it's like that, I couldn't say. Anukampa probably got aced out of modern Buddhism because in the Mahayana, compassion, presumably karuna, and wisdom are the two wings you fly to awakening, right? And so the emphasis on compassion really drove karuna to a very prominent place in the Mahayana, along with wisdom. And so that, I think, feeds back into Western Buddhism in general, because Western Buddhism is taking stuff from both the Theravada and the Mahayana. And so I think that's why it's taught like it is in the West. But why it was like that in the time of the suttas, don't know.
I see that Maya has her hand up, so I don't want to take more time than possible, but I do. Well, I'll hold my question. I'll come back. I'll defer to Maya for the moment. Thank you.
Okay, Maya.
Hi, Leigh.
Hi.
One thing I would like to add about that anukampa is I don't know where I read it. It was like, I care so much, so my heart quivers. Mm-hmm. That made sense to me. And then I don't know it is accurate, but that feels right to me, about the compassion.
Yeah.
And then my question is about mudita. So I practice Brahma Vihara to enter into jhana. Mm-hmm. So while I am doing it, what I was noticing is when I come to mudita it's not about it's about like feeling the joy about somebody is doing well. But at the same time, what I noticed is even if we are going through difficult times and painful times, that we feel that joy because we are there, support each other, mm-hmm. and then connect each other. And then I felt like that is also mudita. that I felt that really strongly when my father passed away many years ago. You know, I was crying and I was smiling because everybody's coming there to grieve together. And then I was also very happy that they are there and then smiling at each other. So I thought that that is also mudita
Yeah.
to connect. What do you
Yeah.
think of that?
Yeah, definitely. So, yes, there are situations where there's both sadness and joy happening at the same time, particularly around the death of someone who's led a really good life. You know, if they've led a really good life, they've had probably an impact on a lot of people who are going to miss them. And that's sadness, but they led a really good life, and there's joy for the fact that you know them, and so the two together. And so the sadness is sadness, and the joy, since you're sharing it with all these people, yeah, it's mudita, right? Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. Barton has posted in the chat a paper from Gil on Anukampa. He is co-leader of a course on now at sati.org, and they may run it again. Excellent teachers and dialogue. So there you go. If you want to know more about Anukampa, read the paper, or yeah, I guess it's a paper there. And if you get a chance, another great sati center happening. Other questions or comments? Victoria.
This isn't related to what we're talking about tonight, but I, one teacher that I know, she insists that there should be 11 paramis and not 10 because she says, she says, I'm going to stand by it. The Buddha made a mistake. Anyway, she's very funny. Anyway, the 11th parami for her is gratitude. And it's kind of an interesting position in the sense that gratitude's such a big, it's really like the thing right now, at least in all the sanghas that I know. Like I now have like a dozen gratitude buddies from various classes and courses, and we have to send 3 gratitudes a day. And it's like a whole thing in the Buddhist world, at least the one that I'm familiar with. Um, and so I just would love to hear you riff on that a little bit. Like how how would you like fold it in, sort of like folding in the sugar or whatever if you're baking something, like how is it, it's because it's obviously in there, it's in
Yeah.
all the
It's
teachings,
in there in many places.
and I see it myself as kind of it's embedded in generosity, for example. It's like kind of the flip side, or there's kind of a yin yang thing going on with gratitude and generosity. But I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Thanks.
Yeah. So the first thing, the paramis don't occur in the suttas. They're in the Jataka tales. That's where they show up.
Well, so it was a great question. Okay, well, carry on, please.
Yeah. And so it wasn't the Buddha that made the list. It was somebody who liked the number 10 because they've got 10 fingers, I presume. And so, yeah, adding gratitude is actually a very good idea. Ayakema said at the start of every meditation period, you should generate some gratitude. I mean, this is like sit down and instead of putting your attention immediately on your breath, generate some gratitude. Gratitude to the circumstances that taught you to meditate, allow you to meditate, your teachers, the Buddha, whatever's going on, generate some gratitude. She also suggested that you do some metta before you start your meditation as well. And so, yeah, these are important things. I don't want to say no list is complete. Some of the lists are complete, but the more things there are in a list, then the possibilities of adding something. You might have heard of the 12 links of dependent origination. Are you familiar with the 24 links of dependent origination? Somebody went and added some more, which is a very brilliant sutta. It's Samyutta 12:23, the Transcendental Dependent Origination, the Upanisa Sutta. So yeah, take these lists as suggestions, and if you think there's something else that fits, just because it's not in the list doesn't mean that you should ignore it. If you think it fits, then practice it, definitely.
Thank you.
Right.
And just apropos of what you said, Ayakema said to start with gratitude. I've always felt like I can't practice metta without gratitude. It seems like that's the whole idea. Like, why would you wish the neutral person to be happy? Like it seems like you have to have gratitude generating within you to generate the metta for all the difference.
I don't know about have to, but it certainly helps. And she did put gratitude before the metta, so yeah, it certainly helps.
Yeah, it gets sort of warms you up for it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Joe.
Well, this is just something that just arose for me just when you were talking a minute ago, talking about gratitude for this and the teachers and blah, blah. I mean, I don't mean blah, blah, but I have respect.
Yeah.
I suddenly realized that I have a lot of gratitude for all the pain and difficulties in the earlier part of my life. Because without that, I'd probably be sitting there rooting for the 49ers and drinking beer and having a great old time, but I might not have had a chance to have some of the insights as to what life's about the way I have.
Yeah. Yeah. Ayakema said our best teacher is dukkha. Yeah. You think about it. If everything goes well, you don't learn anything. You just keep doing what you're doing because everything is going well. And it's only when things don't go well that we actually are motivated to figure out a better way to do things. So yeah, gratitude for all the learning experiences that helped you learn. Yeah, definitely.
Can I do a follow-on one then?
Sure.
Oftentimes when I'm concerned about the effects of the changes in our climate and the extinction of species and so forth, what arises for me is just this sense of pure caring, I think, for no other reason than that they exist. And both my grandfather and my father were at one times in their lives watchmakers.
Oh, wow.
And so I used to liken it to having a beautiful Swiss watch, or in this case, since they were American watch. They worked for Hamilton Watch Company. And then just randomly scattering grains of sand into it without ever having looked to see what was going on and the beauty that might be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the idea of just pure care for no other reason than that it exists. And it's a thing beyond our own creation, I think.
Yeah. We have the ability to recognize the interconnected nature of the universe. I mean, yes, we live in a culture that is definitely promoting individuality, but it turns out that's not what's really going on. I mean, think about this right here. Okay, yes, it took the Sati Center to organize it, but it also took the people that created the internet and the people that made your computer and people that made my computer and the people keeping the electricity on. And, you know, and we could go on and on. The food that I ate today so that I'm not starving and the food that you ate. And, you know, when you start looking at what you're dependent upon the whole universe, and so is every other thing. And when you start seeing those dependencies, then it becomes a net. And it's not that everything is connected to everything else, but everything's connected to enough other things that it makes a whole unitary net of relationships and connections and everything else. And so if you can tap into that, the caring is obvious. If this hand gets caught, this hand doesn't go, oh, you stupid hand, why'd you do that? It's like right there because it recognizes the interconnectedness. Well, it's the same with us and every other living creature, and the forest, and the fields, and the planet. Yeah.
Well, I don't see any other hands raised, so that leads me to something else. When the Dalai Lama was at Mountain View back in the early 2000s, I went to listen to him, and his topic was the Heart Sutra.
Mm-hmm.
And he was discussing ultimate reality. But then he said that, well, not so much ultimate. Let me see if I can phrase this better. So he was discussing the fact, basically, he was basically talking about conditioned arising, right? And he was, but then, he didn't call it ultimate. That's where I got that's wrong. He called it absolute reality. And he said, you have to live your daily life, and depending on one's point of view, I look at myself as being a primate, and so I have to do the things that primates need to do to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to live in sort of my subjective reality in order to go get in the car and feed myself. But I'm sort of, your teachings have been pretty amazing. I first ran across you in a podcast that you did with somebody looking at dependent origination, actually. And as more time goes on, I sort of feel like it's more possible to notice that everything is just sort of conditioned reality, and including oneself, and to start to abide there in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
could you comment on that?
Yeah. So we need the big picture, the ultimate or absolute reality of the interconnectedness of everything. But from that perspective, you can't cross the street. You've actually got to drop back down into and see this traffic coming, and I need to stay here and protect myself until the traffic clears. So we've got to operate in both perspectives. They talk about the two truths, the absolute truth and the relative truth or conventional truth. I want to talk about the two perspectives and the truths seen from the two perspectives. So there's the ultimate perspective or the absolute perspective, and that's, everything is vastly interconnected. Nothing stands alone. And then there's the relative or conventional perspective, which is I live in this house and that's my car and this is my computer, etc. Right? And these are conventions. Nagarjuna, when he was talking about the two truths, he said there are truths that don't fully reveal, and there are truths that are sublime. So what is this? You probably immediately identified it as a cell phone. Okay, it's my cell phone. But this doesn't fully reveal the fact that it's silicon and glass and metal and some people in a sweatshop and somebody programming in the peninsula down here, writing the software, and me buying it, and now it's temporarily mine. And when it wears out, it's going to be electronic waste, and it'll get recycled, and so forth. And the silicon in it, you're missing completely the beach where the sand was, where the silicon came from, and you're missing the ore that the metal was extracted from. So there's a lot more going on than cell phone. So at the relative level, it's my cell phone. At the ultimate level, the absolute level, it's just another dependently originated object that has so many dependencies, we can't even enumerate them. And so, we have to operate with both. And it's not that one is better than the other. If you have a bowl, just a regular old soup bowl, is it concave or convex? I mean, those are opposites. What is a soup bowl? Is it concave or convex? Well, you're going to put soup in it. I suggest the concave. You're going to elevate a tea candle. You can use the convex. And so it's both at once. Reality is absolute, and the absolute is made up of all the relatives, we could say, right? And the only relative we know is our own personal one. But with enough practice, we begin to get a sense of the ultimate nature of reality, the absolute, if you want to call it that. The fact that it's all vastly interconnected. And that's where practice will lead us if we take it deep enough, I think. At least that's where it's led me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's something else in the chat. Oh boy, that's a long one. Let's see. Well, if you're loving someone for the reward, that's not love, right? Well, love should have no reward associated with it. It should just be, yeah, this is a person. I hope it goes well for them. Now, I hope it goes well for them. The only thing that's really going to go well to bring somebody happiness is happiness that's obtained through karmically useful means, right? Through wholesome activities, right? So you can think of someone who's doing unwholesome things and they're making all sorts of promises and whatnot. You can hope that they can find some wholesome means to find happiness, that their unwholesome activities are not going to bring happiness. Maya.
Okay, so when I read Analayo, the Venerable Analayo's book, and as well as Bhante Bimalaramsi, and they teach us to radiate Brahma Viharas. So do you usually practice with the radiating Brahma Vihara each or for each of them, and how do you do that?
So I have done that practice where I was, working with one of the Brahma Viharas and radiating it in each of the directions above and below and all around. I have done that practice and it's good. But the way that I usually do it, well, instead of telling you, why don't we do it? Okay, so everybody please put your attention on your breath for a few moments. So look into your heart and you will find a brightly shining sun. A sun whose beautiful rays fill you with their warmth. This is the sun of love, and it fills you from head to toe. Now think of someone you really care about. Doesn't matter who it is, your significant other, a child, a dear friend, your cat. Get a sense of this being, and now let the sun in your heart shine on this being as well, filling them with the warm and beautiful rays from the sun in your heart. Now think of other people you're close to. Bring them to mind one by one and fill each of them with the rays of love coming from the sun in your heart. Think of your acquaintances, people like your neighbors, your co-workers, people you see in stores that you frequent. Again, bring them to mind one by one and let the sun in your heart shine on each of them, filling them with love. Think of someone you find difficult and let the sun in your heart shine on them as well. The sun shines on everyone. Let the sun in your heart shine on everyone on this Zoom. All the folks from all over. Let the sun in your heart grow brighter so it illuminates your entire neighborhood, shining on everybody. And all the birds and squirrels and dogs and cats and all the people. Just let that love from your heart, the sun, shine more and more brightly until it fills your town, your city, the whole area around you. Let the sun in your heart grow so bright that it touches every living creature on the continent. Let the sun of love in your heart reach out to the whole world, touching humans and animals, birds, fish, insects, reptiles, amphibians, forests and fields. Now put your attention back on yourself and notice as the sun in your heart sends its rays out to fill the world, the first thing it does is fill you. May all beings everywhere be happy. So that's my favorite way of doing metta. That's from my teacher, Ayakema. If you go to my website, leigh.com, you'll see right on the first page, in the upper right, a link to metta. And if you click the first link after you go there, you'll find transcripts of about 20 or 30 of these metta, guided mettas like this, visualizations that she did. And links to where you can download and listen to her guiding them instead of me. So I think this is probably a good place to stop tonight. I'm going to say it's been great sharing the Dharma with you. May any merit from this sharing of the Dharma be for the benefit and liberation of all beings everywhere. Be well. See you in a week for another story.